I'm going to darken the hills on the right hand side now by adding some slightly darker colour. More or less the same colours I used before, but just adding a little bit more paint to them. So a little bit of stronger grey. Just add a touch more ultramarine. And a tiny amount of burnt sienna to it. And the orange, I'll make that a bit stronger just by adding some more of the earlier colour. That was the cadmium red and cadmium yellow. And I also want some tree colours, so here I'm just going to mix a little bit of burnt sienna. Plenty of paint, not a lot of water, so it's a stickier consistency. And I'll have another one which is a bit darker, so that's burnt sienna with a little bit of ultramarine, and that gives me a darker brown. Try these colours out on a piece of paper. Tree colours at the bottom. Those will be fine. Now using the number 10 brush, so starting at the top, picking up the orangish brown colour and using the brush strokes downwards, paint a bit, leave a few gaps here and there, then pick up the grey and encourage that to mingle with the first colour, and then work it down, work both those colours down, alternating between the two. Take that down to the lake as carefully as possible. Use a tip of the brush to get into that sharp bit. And again, as carefully as possible along the line. Straight as you can. And then while that's damp, before that has a chance to dry, pick up one of those stronger colours that I mixed before, burnt sienna, with a smaller brush, like a number 8 for example, and just drop little blobs in which will be trees on the bank. Then the darker one as well, that was the burnt sienna and ultramarine. Just drop those in. You need to catch the fells while they're still damp to do that. Vary the height a little bit so they're not all too much the same. And let that dry. I'd like to put a little bit of movement on the water now, so using the number 10 brush and some of the sky colour from before, that was the Windsor blue, I'll just take some of that and add a drop of water to it so it's a bit paler, and add a tiny amount of the cadmium red. It is only a tiny amount to darken it. It's so easy to put too much in and end up with a muddy colour. I'll try this on the paper, see how strong it is. It doesn't want to be very strong at all, but there'll be just a few strips of slightly darker colour on the surface of the water as it's disturbed by the breeze or by a current. And as carefully as you can, straight across the paper. When you get to the other end, you can breathe out. And if you don't have too much paint on your brush, it hits and misses the surface of the paper, so you get a sparkly effect. I'll do the same here, leaving a gap. Dragging the brush over the paper. You can't do that if the paint's too wet and the colour wants to be really pale. Now I'll let that dry. Now using a number 6 brush, I'm going to do some trees on the left hand side with a grey, a bluish grey. That's ultramarine and burnt sienna. and a tiny amount of cadmium red. And I'll try this out on a piece of paper again. Get rid of some of the paint so there's not too much on my brush. That's okay. Now, just about here, using a splayed brush. I haven't got too much paint on my brush, so it's almost dry, and I'm dragging the brush a little bit like I did on the water, but with the tip of the brush more. Just on the edge here, and then bring some of those leaves. These are silhouettes of distant trees, and then using the paint a little bit wetter for a couple of tree trunks. Just need to be careful not to have the edges of the trees too solid, but leave a few gaps in between them here and there. And use the tip of the brush to bring one or two of the branches out a bit, and then lower down. There's this bit of island sticking out. That's okay.